Seahawks.com's John Boyle joining us now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. He got to be a fly on the wall in the Seahawks draft room to see what things were like for John Schneider and the rest of the guys. There's a great column recapping all of this up on Seahawks.com. We're also going to ask John about that and the rest of the Seahawks offseason right now. John, my first question is one that I'm sure many people are wondering. Was the spread in the draft room better than the one reporters got?
Well, actually, they don't have any food in the draft room proper. They do have some food outside of the room for the coaches. I was not privy to that. I was not eating that spread, but the media one was pretty darn good.
It was amazing.
I would not complain about that.
I will shout out to the Seahawks who provided like sushi, like actual sashimi and like really, really good food. So it sounds like I'm complaining, but I'm not.
They take good care of us.
Just curious.
I put this in the story, but that John Schneider brought the whole kitchen crew in on the last day of the draft to thank all those guys. I thought that was kind of cool.
I did love that.
Boyle, how you doing, man? I miss you, dog. How you been?
I've been good. How you doing?
Good. Man, when you're in that room, were there any, I don't know how much you can tell us either, right? So I'll just be, I guess, vague when it comes to my question. Was there a moment in the draft where a pick was made and people started moving a bit more frantically? Or was it just a calm demeanor? They're pretty consistent the whole time. How did they react to certain picks?
Yeah, I would definitely say not like frantic at any point. I mean, I'm not in there the entire time. I'm kind of in and out because I got to be back in the media room working some. But I was mostly trying to get in there, leading up to each Seattle pick and through each Seattle pick. Probably what I would say is maybe the most tense moment I saw was waiting to get Christian Haynes. They really liked him. He was high on their board at the time. And there was, kind of a little mini run on offensive linemen going there in the 70s where I think they're really sweating that pick out. So, again, I wouldn't call it frantic, but you could feel the tension in the room building as they were waiting for that pick.
Yeah, I thought that they would look at BB or maybe trade up. And then we had Jim Mora, obviously former Seahawks head coach, but head coach of UConn who joined us and was so high on Christian. And after that interview, I was like, oh, man, now I get it. I get what they might have seen with him. He seems so special. Let's go to that first pick, Byron Murphy. Obviously, when a team is selecting in the first round or making their draft board at all, there aren't 32 first-round grades. Was the board bigger or smaller than you expected when it came to the names that were actually on there for the first round?
Yeah, I mean, I have this in the story. They had 19 first-round guys, which, I haven't been in there every year to get that tally, but I feel like that's somewhat similar. I'd have to go back and look at last year, but, some in the teens is pretty normal. I think it's pretty rare that any NFL team has close to 32 first-round picks, or first-round grades, which is why I think it's common as you get into the later part of the first round for teams to trade back, as they just, don't see as much value in using that pick versus trying to trade back. But, yeah, the Seahawks, they had, like I said, 19 guys. Byron Murphy was one of the higher ones up there, not just defensive guys, but period. So I think as that offensive run really unfolded, they liked the way that was playing for them, that they were going to get to sit back and get their pick of defensive guys.
What's the collaboration like in that room? Because, they show different rooms while other teams are picking. And there's some rooms, there's 10 people in there. Some room, there are 30 people in there. What's the communication like? Are people just sitting back and waiting and John and Mike are kind of controlling the conversation? Or is it like a group project and everyone's giving their feedback in the whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a group of kind of that player personnel staff. You got, like Matt Berry, Aaron Heinlein, Trent Kirshner, some of those guys that are working really closely with John throughout, Nolan Teasley, the assistant GM. Those guys are kind of sitting there chatting with John pretty nonstop. It seems like at any time one of them at least is on the phone with somebody calling about something. And then, Mike and John are sitting right next to each other in the front of the room and pretty engaged the whole time talking with each other. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not privy to every conversation. I kind of hide in the back and try to stay out of the way so I can't hear everything that's going on. But it is very collaborative with all those guys. And, they're talking to the area scouts, depending on which guys they're looking at. They're talking to assistant coaches sometimes. There's all sorts of different people involved.
In reading your story, I don't want to say I was surprised, but whenever we get to day 3, I am not like the biggest college football fan in the world, so there's always names that I kind of have to Google and look up. And I didn't know a ton about this year's Auburn team, and obviously had to look up things about both corners they took. In your story, it really struck me how excited they seemed to be to get both these guys, and how high the grade was on both of these guys, especially considering that they didn't get both in the fourth round. I mean, did you get the impression, not just with both corners, but with their draft class, that they really managed to get the guys they were hoping to get?
Yeah, I mean, there's different moments throughout any draft where it's like, okay, we might see more need here, but there's position, or there's just value in terms of, we think these are really good players and they're high up on our board. And just, it was just kind of a funny coincidence. Both of them played the same position at the same school. But yeah, I mean, those guys were kind of sticking out on the draft board as, the proverbial best players available at that point. So, yeah, I mean, it's one thing that's always worth remembering. We talk about, like, oh, they're getting their top guy. Is John Schneider always talks about, part of need is baked into the grade. So, it might be that a position is like, okay, they got a guy who was their highest graded, whatever, and that happened to be position need. Well, that grade might have been slightly affected by the need there. So that is something to remember when we talk about that. But they do, the years I've been in there this years, they have done a really good job of kind of sticking with their board and like, hey, we're not going to really reach and take a guy with a 6th round grade in the 5th round because we need that position, versus, hey, we got a 4th round grade on this guy and he's still available.
John, I felt as if the Hawks were going to stay at 16, but obviously there's a possibility they try to move up or move back. I figured they would move back, if anything. And in your article, you mentioned, people are on the phone talking. I'm sure there's some trade offers out there. Did you ever get the feeling that the team might have been close to a trade, or going into the situation, did you think they're going to stay at 16, and even with the phone calls coming in, there wasn't really a chance there?
Yeah, I mean, going into the day, I thought there was a really good chance to trade back, just because that lack of 2nd round pick. I thought, hey, can you move back in the 20s and get another day 2 pick? That would make a lot of sense. But, they were getting a lot of offers. As John Schneider said afterwards in his press conference, they turned down 4 offers and said there's some good ones too. So I really think as it went along, maybe if Murphy gets picked ahead of them, maybe that changes their opinion on things. But they really liked him as a player, and I think they knew that because of the run on quarterbacks and offensive players, they were getting a really good player in the teams that a lot of drafts, he's a top 10 pick and you're not getting a chance at him. So I just think they felt like he's too good of a player to risk losing out on and moving back. But yeah, I mean, they strongly considered some options. I got the sense that, they were considering a lot of stuff because, John Schneider loves to add that value, and some of the trades were, offers for more draft picks next year, and you can look to the future and say, okay, we could have a really loaded draft in 2025. But again, I think Byron Murphy was just too good of a player, too rare of a talent available at 16 to move back.
Your article also recapped a few of those phone calls to these draft picks. A funny moment, obviously, being trying to get a hold of Tyrese Knight, who tweeted out that he was in the middle of nowhere and had no signal, and probably a heart-stopping moment for John, being like, can someone call his agent? Can someone get him on the line? John, I was actually more interested in less about that moment and just more about the pick itself. Like, you as an analyst, what did you make of the selection of Knight as a fit for this team? He seemed to be, and it's not his fault, but maybe the most controversial pick in this class. What did you think?
First of all, I think analyst is a little overstating my football knowledge when it comes to the draft. But, yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend when we get to the mid-rounds that I know if this guy with a 4th round grade is better than this guy with a 5th round grade. Like, who knows, and the important thing is the people making that decision felt really good about him. I mean, obviously he was a really highly productive player in college, and I thought it was kind of telling in the press conference we got after day 2 of the draft when somebody asked John Schneider about Knight, and he immediately turned it over to Mike McDonald and said, you're the linebacker expert. So I think, obviously Schneider's in charge in that draft room, but I have a hunch on a pick like this where it's a, mid-round, middle linebacker guy, they're probably leaning on Mike McDonald a lot in his evaluation when they're showing him, okay, here's the guys we like. How do you see it? I'm sure Mike McDonald had a lot of opinions on those defensive guys and linebackers in particular, because that's a position he's coached a lot. So I kind of fall under the umbrella of he's obviously a good player in college, and if the head coach of this team, who's a defensive guy, thinks he's a good pick in the 4th round, who am I to argue?